My wife's wedding ring was on her finger when she died. It was on her finger when the funeral home prepared her body. It was on her finger when I kissed her forehead for the last time, before they closed the casket. It was not on her finger when they buried her. I didn't know this for 4 months. Not until a pawnshop owner in Fayetteville, North Carolina, called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said 8 words that stopped my heart. "Sir, I think I have your wife's ring." His name was Martin Chen. He owned Golden Bridge Pawn and Jewelry on Bragg Boulevard, a shop he'd run for 19 years, across the street from the gates of Fort Liberty, the Army installation formerly known as Fort Bragg. Martin told me that a man had come into his shop that morning trying to sell a platinum wedding band with a 82-carat round brilliant diamond in a cathedral setting. Martin had examined the ring under his loupe, a 10x jeweler's magnification lens, the standard tool used in gemological assessment, and found an inscription on the inner band, AW and RW 64 1986, forever begins today. Arthur and Ruth Whitfield. June 14, 1986. Our wedding date. The inscription I'd chosen at Jared's Jewelers in Raleigh 39 years ago, engraved in a font so small you needed a magnifying glass to read it. "The man who brought it in," Martin said. He gave his name as Derek Whitfield. He said it was his mother's ring and she'd given it to him. I told him I needed to verify ownership before I could process the sale. He got nervous. He left the ring and said he'd come back tomorrow. Derek Whitfield. My son. The man who'd been at his mother's funeral. The man who'd helped carry her casket. The man who'd held my hand at the graveside and said, "She's with God now." Dad, my son had taken his mother's wedding ring off her dead finger before they closed the casket and tried to sell it at a pawnshop for vacation money. What my son didn't know was that Martin Chen wasn't just a pawnshop owner, and that ring wasn't just platinum and diamond. What Ruth had hidden inside that ring, literally inside it, in a micro-engraved code beneath the inscription that only a jeweler's loupe could reveal, was a message that changed everything. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If that phone call already has you gripping your screen, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps this channel reach more people. And a gentle reminder, while this story carries real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. Stay with me, because the ring is just the key. What it unlocks is the story Ruth spent her last year building. My name is Arthur Whitfield. I'm 67 years old. I live in Hope Mills, North Carolina, a small town 7 miles south of Fayetteville, in Cumberland County, where the pine trees are tall and the military installations are close, and the kind of people who live here are the kind who've served or married someone who has. I spent 28 years as a civilian employee at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, renamed in 2023 as part of the Naming Commission's process to rename 9 Army installations that bore the names of Confederate officers, as directed by the National Defense Authorization Act of 2021. I worked in the Directorate of Public Works, Facilities Maintenance, Building Systems HV. I fixed what was broken. I kept the buildings functioning. I retired in 2021 with a federal pension of $48,000 per year through the Federal Employees Retirement System, FARS, and a thrift savings plan balance of $320,000. Ruth was a librarian, 30 years at the Cumberland County Public Library on Maiden Lane in Fayetteville. She managed the reference section, ran the children's reading programs, and knew the Dewey Decimal System the way I knew ductwork, by heart, by instinct, by decades of daily practice. She earned a $52,000 at retirement. Her FARS pension was $31,000 per year. Together we were comfortable. Our house, a 3-bedroom on Stony Point Road in Hope Mills, was worth $265,000 paid off. Our combined retirement income was $79,000 per year plus Social Security. Ruth's life insurance through the Federal Employees Group Life Insurance Program, the FIGLI, was $150,000. My TSP was $3,000, $20,000. Total estate approximately $735,000, not $31 million, not $8 million, $735,000. The wealth of 2 federal employees who'd worked their entire lives, saved what they could, and built something modest but solid. The kind of estate that shouldn't attract predators. But it did, because the predator was our son, Derek Whitfield. Born 1992, our only child, and the source of more financial damage than any storm, any flood, any mechanical failure I dealt with in 28 years of facilities maintenance. Derek was charming. That was the problem. Charm in small doses is a social skill. In large doses, it's a weapon. Derek had large dose charm, the kind that opens doors and empties wallets, and makes the person being used feel like they're being honored. He could borrow $5,000 and make you feel like you'd won the lottery by lending it. He'd been borrowing since he was 22. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, always with a story, always with a deadline, always with the promise that this was the last time. The amounts grew. By 2024, Derek had borrowed a total of $87,000 from Ruth and me over 11 years. Not $1 had been repaid, though $87,000. In loans that were never loans, they were extractions. Each one accompanied by a performance of urgency and gratitude that made saying no feel like cruelty. Dad, the transmission blew. I can't get to work. Mom, the landlord is threatening eviction. I need first and last. It's just until the commission check hits. The commission check never hit. The transmission blew again. The landlord was always threatening. Derek worked in car sales. Not at a dealership, at a series of dealerships, each one lasting 12 to 18 months before he was let go for performance issues. Car sales is a commission-based profession where income varies widely. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the median annual wage for retail salespersons is approximately $30,600, with the top 10% earning over $65,000 and the bottom 10% earning under $24,000. Derek was consistently in the bottom quartile. Not because he couldn't sell, he could sell anything to anyone once. The problem was the second time. Charm works once. Competence works forever. Derek had the first, he never developed the second. By 2024, Derek was 32, earning approximately $35,000 a year, renting an apartment in Fayetteville for $1,200 a month, and carrying to $28,000 in credit card debt. His financial life was a structure without a foundation, a building I would have condemned in my professional capacity. Ruth knew. Ruth always knew. She was a librarian. A person whose profession is organizing information, finding patterns in data, and helping people access what they need. She'd been organizing the information about Derek the same way she organized the reference section, systematically, quietly, with the understanding that the pattern would eventually need to be addressed. Ruth was diagnosed with colon cancer in January 2024. Stage A theory. The cancer had spread to the lymph nodes but not to distant organs. The 5-year survival rate for stage A colon cancer is approximately 65%, according to the American Cancer Society. Ruth started chemotherapy, a FELFOX regimen, which combines 5-fluorouracil, leucovorin, and oxaliplatin at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center in Fayetteville. The treatment was brutal. Oxaliplatin causes peripheral neuropathy, numbness and tingling in the hands and feet that can become permanent. Ruth's hands, which had spent 30 years cataloging books and teaching children to read, became unreliable. She dropped things. She couldn't type. She couldn't hold a pen for more than a few minutes without pain. But she could still plan. And in the last year of her life, while cancer ate her body and chemotherapy destroyed her nerves, Ruth built something from her library desk that Derek would never see coming. Ruth died on October 3, 2024. She was 66. She died at home in our bedroom with me holding her hand. The hospice nurse was there. The chaplain was there. Derek was not there. He'd said he was coming. He arrived 2 hours after she died. Traffic, he said. Always traffic. The funeral was October 8th. Rogers and Brees Funeral Home on Ramsey Street in Fayetteville. 150 people. Ruth was loved by the library staff, by the reading program families, by the neighbors who'd borrowed her books and returned her kindness. The viewing was October 7th, the night before the funeral. Open casket. Ruth was in the blue dress she'd chosen. Her reading glasses were in her pocket, her request, and on her left-hand fourth finger was the ring, the platinum band with the 82-carat diamond, AW and RW 6-42 1986. Forever begins today. The casket was open from 6 to 9 p.m. 150 people passed through. Family and friends paid their respects. And at some point during those 3 hours, someone removed the ring from Ruth's finger. I didn't check. Why would I? You don't check a dead woman's fingers. You look at her face. You hold the edge of the casket. You cry. You don't inventory the jewelry, because it doesn't occur to you that someone in a room full of mourners would steal a ring off a dead woman's hand. 4 months later, Martin Chen called. Now, Martin Chen. I need to tell you about Martin because Martin is the reason this story has a second act. Martin Chen was 54 years old. Born in San Francisco. Second-generation Chinese-American. He'd served 20 years in the United States Army. Not as infantry, not as support. As a special agent with the Army Criminal Investigation Division, known as CD. CID is the Army's felony-level criminal investigative organization, the equivalent of the FBI within the military. CID agents investigate fraud, theft, homicide, and serious felonies involving Army personnel and property. Martin had spent his Army career investigating fraud, procurement fraud, contract fraud, benefits fraud, and theft. After retirement, he'd moved to Fayetteville, home to Fort Liberty and one of the largest military communities in the country, and opened the pawnshop. Not because he loved pawnbroking. Because a pawnshop on Bragg Boulevard sees everything: stolen military equipment, fraudulent jewelry, forged documents, and the particular desperation of people who need cash and don't care where it comes from. Martin ran his shop the way he'd run investigations: every item logged, every seller photographed, every transaction cross-referenced against local law enforcement databases. North Carolina's Pawn Shop Act, NCGS Chapter 91A, requires that pawnbrokers maintain detailed records of all transactions, including the seller's identification, a description of the item, and a 30-day holding period before pawned items can be sold. Martin exceeded every requirement. He photographed items under magnification. He searched inscription databases. He ran serial numbers. When Derek walked in with Ruth's ring, Martin's CID training activated instantly. The man was nervous, Martin told me. Not the normal nervous. Everyone's a little uncomfortable selling jewelry at a pawn shop. This was different. He kept looking at the door. He couldn't maintain eye contact. He said the ring was his mother's and she'd given it to him. But when I asked for documentation, a gift letter, a will, excerpt, anything, he said he didn't have any. Martin examined the ring under his loupe. He found the inscription AW and RW 6040 1986. He wrote down the initials and the date. He told Derek he needed to verify ownership. Derek left the ring and said he'd return. Martin didn't wait for Derek to return. He searched the inscription AW and RW, June 1986. Fayetteville area against local obituary records. Cumberland County maintains a digital obituary archive through the Register of Deeds office. Martin found Ruth's obituary within 20 minutes. Ruth Ann Whitfield died October 3, 2024. Survived by husband Arthur Whitfield and son Derek Whitfield. The seller was the deceased's son. The ring belonged to the deceased's husband. The son had no documentation, and the ring had been on the deceased's finger at the viewing. Martin confirmed this by calling Rogers and Brees Funeral Home, where the director, a man named Wayne Brees, told him, yes, Mrs. Whitfield was wearing her wedding ring at the viewing. The family did not request its removal before burial. If the ring is not in the casket, someone took it. Martin called me. I drove to Martin's shop that afternoon. He handed me the ring. I held it in my palm, the weight of it, the warmth of it, the particular feeling of holding something that belonged on another person's hand and will never be there again. I turned it over. I looked at the inscription under Martin's loupe. AW and RW, 6 to 4 Theuthurus 1986. Forever begins today, Mr. Whitfield, Martin said. There's something else. Look below the inscription. Deeper, there's a second engraving. I adjusted the loupe. Below the original inscription, in letters so small they were invisible to the naked eye, requiring 10x magnification to read, was a second line. A line that hadn't been there when I bought the ring in 1986, FCB 1247, 5 characters. A letter number combination that meant nothing to me and everything to Ruth. Do you know what that is? Martin asked. I do. It's a safe deposit box number. FCB is the prefix used by First Citizens Bank. 1247 is the box number. Your wife had a micro-engraving added to her ring, after the original inscription, below it invisible without magnification. She turned her wedding ring into a key. Ruth, a librarian who'd spent 30 years organizing information. She'd hidden the most important reference number of her life inside the one object she knew would never be thrown away, never be ignored, and, if it were ever stolen, would eventually be found. Because wedding rings are identifiable. They have inscriptions, they have histories. They find their way home. Unless they're sold at a pawnshop by a son who doesn't think to check the inscription under magnification. Who doesn't think at all? I drove to First Citizens Bank on Skibo Road in Fayetteville. I brought my ID, Ruth's death certificate, and a copy of her will, which named me as executor. The bank manager, a woman named Deborah Hines, verified my identity and my authority as executor and led me to the vault, box 1247, a medium-sized safe deposit box approximately 5 inches by 10 inches by 24 inches. The annual rental fee $75 had been paid through 2027. Ruth had prepaid 3 years. She'd planned for the possibility that it would take time for the ring to lead someone here. I opened the box. Inside were 5 items. Item 1, a composition notebook, 120 pages. Ruth's handwriting, the small, precise script of a woman who'd spent 30 years writing catalog cards and reference notes. The notebook was dated January 2024 through September 2024, the months of her cancer treatment. The months she was dying. The notebook was a ledger. Derek's ledger. Every dollar Ruth and I had given Derek over 11 years, date, amount, stated reason, and Ruth's annotation of the actual reason. $5,000 on March 3, 2016. Derek said transmission repair. Derek bought a 65-inch TV. I saw the delivery box in his apartment. $8,000 on November 12, 2019. Derek said rent emergency. Derek booked a cruise to the Bahamas. Posted photos on Instagram the following week. Owned $12,000 on July 8, 2020. Derek said medical bills. Derek has no medical bills. He has no insurance. He spent the money at the Harrah's Cherokee Casino. I found the receipt in his jacket pocket when he visited in August. 11 years. 37 transactions. That $87,000. Every dollar tracked. Every lie documented. Ruth had been keeping the books on her own son the way she kept the books at the library, with the meticulous attention of a professional cataloger who believes that accurate records are the foundation of accountability. Item 2, bank statements. Not ours, Derek's. Ruth had obtained them through a method that surprised me. Derek had given Ruth online access to his bank account in 2020. He'd needed her to transfer money during one of his emergencies and had shared his login credentials. He'd never changed the password. Ruth had been monitoring his account for 4 years, downloading monthly statements and printing them at the library. The statements showed what the ledger annotated. The money we gave Derek was never used for what he claimed. Transmission repairs coincided with electronics purchases. Rent emergencies coincided with travel bookings. Medical bills coincided with casino withdrawals. The pattern was consistent and undeniable. Derek was converting parental love into personal entertainment, one lie at a time. Item 3, Ruth's revised will. Drafted by an attorney named Sandra Kowalski in Fayetteville, an estate planning specialist with 22 years of practice. The will was dated August 2024, 2 months before Ruth died. It replaced the previous will from 2018. The new will contained 3 provisions. First, Derek was removed as a beneficiary. He received the deliberate exclusion amount. The will stated, I leave my son, Derek Allen Whitfield, the sum of $1. This bequest is intentional. I love my son. I do not trust him with the things I've built. Second, the entire estate, Ruth's share of the house, her Fagali insurance, her FARS pension survivor benefit, and her half of our joint savings was placed in a trust, the Ruth Ann Whitfield Family Education Trust. I was the lifetime beneficiary. Upon my death, the trust funded literacy programs at the Cumberland County Public Library, Ruth's library, the place where she'd spent her career teaching children to read. Third, the will contained a no contest clause. Under North Carolina law, an interim clause, NCGS 3147, provides that if a beneficiary challenges the will without probable cause, they forfeit their bequest. Derek's $1 would become $0. Item 4, a sealed envelope addressed to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. Inside was a formal complaint alleging theft from a decedent, the legal term for stealing from a dead person's body or estate. The complaint identified Derek Whitfield as the suspected thief and described the wedding ring, platinum, 82-carat diamond, inscription, approximate value $4,800, as the stolen item. Ruth had written this complaint before she died. She knew Derek would take the ring. She'd known it the way librarians know which books will be stolen. By pattern recognition, by understanding which items are valuable and which people are desperate. She'd also known that the ring would surface. Because rings with inscriptions are identifiable. because pawn shops in North Carolina are required by NCGS 91A to hold items for 30 days and report transactions to law enforcement. Because the system that Ruth trusted, the system of records, documentation, and accountability, would eventually bring the ring home. She just needed someone to find the second inscription. And she'd bet on a jeweler's loupe. The bet paid off, because Martin Chen wasn't just a pawnshop owner. He was a former CID investigator who examined everything under magnification. Ruth couldn't have known about Martin specifically, but she knew that professional pawnbrokers inspect jewelry under loupes. She knew the micro-engraving would be found. She'd played the odds the way she'd organized her library, with the confidence of a woman who understood systems. Item 5, a photograph, Ruth and me. Our wedding day. June 14, 1986. She's holding a bouquet of white roses. I'm in a rented tuxedo. We're standing on the steps of the church, Haymount United Methodist on Hay Street in Fayetteville. We're both smiling. We're both 28 years old. And on her left hand, fourth finger, is the ring. On the back of the photograph, in Ruth's handwriting, Arthur. This ring carried our story for 38 years. Now it carries the last chapter. Follow where it leads. I love you, Ruth. I sat in the bank vault for 20 minutes. Alone, holding the photograph in one hand and the ring in the other. The ring that had been on her finger for 38 years. The ring that someone had stolen from her dead hand. The ring that she'd turned into a map. A librarian's treasure map, encoded in micro-engraving, leading to a safe deposit box containing the evidence that would protect me and condemn our son. I delivered Ruth's complaint to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office that afternoon. I also delivered the ledger, the bank statements, and a copy of the revised will. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Teresa Maldonado from the Property Crimes Division, reviewed the materials and opened an investigation. The investigation confirmed the theft. Rogers and Brees Funeral Home provided a written statement that Ruth's ring was present at the start of the viewing and that no family member had authorized its removal. The funeral home's security camera, a system installed in 2020 as part of an insurance requirement, showed footage of Derek approaching the casket at 8:47 p.m. on October 7th, the night of the viewing. The footage showed Derek standing at the casket for approximately 90 seconds, longer than the average mourner, who typically spends 20-40 seconds. His right hand moved toward Ruth's left hand. When he stepped away, his right hand went into his jacket pocket. 90 seconds. That's how long it took my son to steal his mother's wedding ring off her dead finger. 90 seconds of footage that the funeral home camera captured in the same dispassionate resolution that captured 150 people saying goodbye. Derek was arrested on March 4, 2025. The charges: larceny from a decedent under NCGS 1478, a Class H felony in North Carolina, punishable by up to 25 months imprisonment. Additionally, attempting to sell stolen property under NCGS 1471-1. And fraud for misrepresenting ownership to a pawnbroker. Martin Chen testified at the preliminary hearing. He described his examination of the ring, the inscription, the verification through obituary records, and the phone call to me. He also testified about the second inscription, FCB 1247, and its significance. Mrs. Whitfield turned her wedding ring into a reference card, Martin said. She encoded the location of her evidence inside the one object she knew her husband would want returned. It was the most sophisticated piece of personal security I've seen in 20 years of investigating fraud, and I've investigated fraud at the federal level. Derek's attorney attempted to argue that the ring was a family heirloom and that Derek had a reasonable belief of ownership. The prosecutor responded with the funeral home footage, the funeral director's statement, and the ledger documenting Derek's 11-year pattern of financial exploitation. The defendant didn't inherit this ring. The prosecutor said he stole it from his mother's dead hand at her own viewing, while 150 people mourned in the same room. He then attempted to sell it at a pawnshop to fund a vacation. The ring was worth approximately $4,800. The vacation he was planning, a trip to Cancun with his girlfriend, booked on Expedia for $3,200, was worth less than the ring he stole from the woman who gave him life. Derek was found guilty. He was sentenced to 12 months in the Cumberland County Detention Center, suspended to 60 days active jail time plus 24 months supervised probation, 300 hours community service, and $4,800 in restitution for the value of the ring. The will was executed as Ruth intended. Derek received his one. He did not contest it. His attorney advised against it, citing the no contest clause and the overwhelming documentation in Ruth's ledger. The trust was funded. The literacy programs at the Cumberland County Public Library received their first distribution in September 2025, of $15,000 to establish the Ruth Whitfield Children's Reading Fund. The ring is on my nightstand, next to the photograph from our wedding day, next to Ruth's reading glasses which I brought home from the library after she retired. The ring carries two inscriptions now, the one I chose in 1986 and the one Ruth added in 2024, Forever Begins Today, and FCB 1247, a love letter and a case number, a marriage and a map. The visible and the hidden, the two layers of everything Ruth ever did. I visit Martin Chen's shop once a month. We have coffee. He shows me interesting items that come through, old military medals, vintage watches, the occasional piece of jewelry with a story attached. He told me once that in 19 years of pawnbroking, Ruth's ring was the only item that carried its own investigation inside it. Most stolen jewelry is anonymous, Martin said. The stones are recut. The metal is melted. The inscriptions are filed off. Your wife's ring was the opposite. She made it more identifiable, not less. She added information instead of removing it. She wanted it to be found. She wanted the trail to lead somewhere. She was a librarian, I said. Librarians don't hide information. They organize it so people can find it. Martin smiled. She organized her own case. From a hospital bed, using a wedding ring and a safe deposit box. That's the best filing system I've ever seen. He's right. Ruth organized everything. Her life, her death, her evidence, her final message. All of it cataloged, indexed, and cross-referenced, the way a librarian organizes a collection. Not for herself. For the person who comes looking. I'm Arthur Whitfield. I'm 67 years old. My son sold my late wife's wedding ring to get money for a vacation. But when I got a call from a pawnshop owner who used to investigate fraud for the Army, I got the ring back, and inside it was a code that led to a safe deposit box that contained everything Ruth had spent her last year building. A ledger, a will, a complaint, and a photograph of two 28-year-olds on church steps with a future they couldn't see, and a love that outlasted everything, even death, even theft, even a son who didn't deserve her. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Tell me what you think Ruth would say if she could see her reading fund helping children at her library. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about family, truth, and the women who organize the evidence that saves us. Before we close, this story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, that's completely okay. Take care of yourselves. But if you stayed until the end, thank you. Ruth would have liked you. She always said the best readers are the ones who follow the story all the way to the reference section. Now, if you'll excuse me. The ring is on the nightstand. The inscription still says Forever Begins Today. And it still does, every morning, when I read it.